Dí gaomh go léir, chunas atá sibh, chunas tá tú féin Siobhán?
Ó goach go agad, agus sú héana Emma.
Tá mé go bra. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this month's Q&A, our Irish language Q&A. We had a break last month, so we are back for September and we're happy to be back as well. How are you feeling, Siobhán? Are you happy for being back now?
Oh, it's great. It's great to be back and doing another live stream. And hearing all these questions.
Exactly. We've great questions this month. We have plenty of them, so we're going to fly through them. We're going to go without any muil on us now. So I'll start off with the first question that comes in from Fraser in Edinburgh. And Fraser has a question about pronunciation. So the word mana in Irish seems to be pronounced as though the N is an R. I'm interested to know what the etymology or reason for this is. I couldn't think of any other times where I've heard this happen. For example, I've never heard de gra or degna pronounced as de gra. Do you have any other examples of this N to R sound change? And do you know the origin of it in mana? So, Siobhán, you are probably the best one to answer this one because you are the leading example of this R.
So yeah, it's not just in mana or mra. You can find that the R after practically, I suppose, whenever it comes after a consonant, directly after a consonant, this is it turns into an R in both the Ulster and Connacht dialect, so basically outside of the Munster dialect. So that's why you will see words that begin in CN or MN, like in mra, or GN become like an R. So that's why, like with these three words here, mra, women, grow, business, krav, bone. So all of those change like that. So the thing is, in the Munster dialect, the N is pronounced, but it's not exactly what you expect either. It's not just M sound directly and N sound. There is what's called a little auxiliary vowel between the M and the N, for example, in the word mana. So as you can hear, you're saying mana, so it's a bit like there's a U or an O or some little vowel, invisible vowel as I like to call it, between the two letters. And so that's the difference. So there are more words than mra. Why this happens exactly, I don't know. Maybe it's just that some dialects found it easier to say one thing rather than the other. I don't know myself why this happened, but sometimes you see that in Irish and in other languages as well, where you have one dialect having, let's say, a B in the word and the other dialect having P for the same word. So B and P, because in a sense they're a bit similar. And so this is probably somewhat of a similar scenario here. What are your thoughts on that, Emma?
Yeah, see, I don't often hear it. I hear you say it, Siobhán, but I come in contact more so myself with Munster dialect speakers, and we definitely have that mana. So I don't know why it happens. None of them are technically sounded the way they're spelt. You know, no one says no. It doesn't roll off the tongue as easily. So as you said, both the mana or knov happens as well as the mra, because both of those roll off the tongue easier, faster. And in Irish, you'll often find that things are shortened and said in a certain way to get it out of your mouth faster. We speak quite quickly in Irish and in English in Ireland. So that's, well, my theory. If anyone has any theories as to why that happens, any experts in the comments, we will welcome your answers. Okay, so on Kiad Kesh Ella, so the next question comes from Kevin Cummins, all the way from Albuquerque in New Mexico. And Kevin asks, how do I count to 10 in Gaelic? Forgive the so rudimentary a question. I'm an utter beginner and I've just realised that I want to learn Gaelic or Irish. I hope to begin with whatever 10 words you might tell me. Well, the first 10 words that we will tell you then will be from 1 to 10. So that's not a bad way to start. Siobhán, while that's 3 Wintas.
No way, Marcin. Here's 1 to 10. A hain, a do, a tree, a cahar, a cuig, a sé, a seacht, a hocht, a ní, a dé. Now, you can practice those with our video called How to Count from 1 to 10 in Irish Gaelic. So if you search that on YouTube, you'll find it for everyone to see. So you can practice on that, and you not only learn how to recite the numbers as I've done there, but you'll also learn how to count things, as those numbers are slightly different from what I've just said there. So they vary a little. And go to that video, How to Count from 1 to 10 in Irish Gaelic, once this live stream is over, to learn more about that and to practice. And that particular video, How to Count from 1 to 10 in Irish Gaelic, that'll be linked following this live stream in the blog post linked in the description box below. So you'll be able to go and see it there.
So yeah, it's a nice way to start if you want to learn any language. Counting from 1 to 10 is not a bad way to start. So start off there, any of you that are also watching. Make sure you give it a go and watch the video that we will have linked, and is actually linked now in the live chat also, if you're feeling extra eager to start right now. Okay, so we have the next question from Tay in California. And this is an interesting one, and it's one that I'm sure Tay isn't the only one that might struggle with or try to hear and doesn't. So Tay says, I'm trying to hear the slender and broad consonants. I know the broad and slender vowels with no problem, but I can't seem to really hear the difference with consonants. Now, this is something that pops up when you first start learning Irish. It's a very important part of learning Irish, and you know, there can be some difficulty with it. Siobhán, do you have any answer for Tay there?
Well, some slender consonants are definitely easier to distinguish than others. So I definitely get where you're coming from, Tay. And it can take a bit of, it can take a while to tune your ear in. But some are much easier than others. For example, a slender S sounds like SH in English. So an example of that would be the word misha, me, misha. So that's an example of that. So that's one of the ones that's the same in every single dialect, the slender S. The slender D and T too can sound very different from their broad counterparts depending on dialect, but still they're easier to differentiate. So a slender D tends to sound something like halfway between a D and a J sound. So it's not the J sound in English, but it's kind of like halfway, you could say. Such as in the words jess and dinner. So as you can hear there, in jess, nice, and dinner, dinner, it's not a D per se, as we'd understand a D in English, and it's not a J either. So again, that being said, that does vary depending on dialect. So the D sound there is closer to your broad D sound, let's say, in Munster Irish, and then it gets it's more accentuated in the Ulster dialect, where it does sound more like a J, but it doesn't. It's still not the English J sound. So it depends, and then Connacht, then it's kind of in the middle between that subtler Munster dialect sound and that stronger Ulster sound. And T is very similar in that respect. It sounds something between a T and the English CH sound, such as in chair. Examples are teach and ditch. And again, it's kind of like a TCH sound, but still not the same as if it was the word each, for example, in English. It's still different, but it's similar. When it comes to the other slender consonants, which are basically just any consonant preceded or followed by a slender vowel, those are I and E. You tend to hear a kind of like a little y sound. Particularly that's when, for example, you have a consonant followed by an E. So such words as laba and geta. So with geta, it's not as pronounced as with laba, laba. So it's not laba, it's laba. And with geta, it's not gata, it's geta. So geta. There's a slight subtle sound there, and everyone will pronounce that a little differently anyway. An individual speaker will do that, never mind someone who speaks a little differently because of their dialect. So it's going to vary on the whole, but there's definitely a difference there between the broad and the slender versions. And also with, let's say, a consonant where an I comes before, precedes the consonant. So usually you don't have an E preceding a consonant, but you have an I. So an example of that could be assel versus ossel. Assel, ossel. So there is a bit of a difference there. It's more maybe like you're stressing the L in ossel. So there's a difference. So ossel means donkeys, ossel, and ossel is a donkey. So that's the plural and the singular form. So an exception sort of to all of what I've said there, kind of in a sense, would be the slender R, which sounds quite unique and is a little harder to explain. And the creation of this sound has been described as being produced by spreading the tongue and forming a small hollow in the front portion of it. The point of the tongue is brought close to the gum just above the upper teeth, below the hard rim. The stream of voiced breath is directed into the hollow in the front of the tongue and can be felt striking the lower lip. Now that quote is from Aids in the Pronunciation of Irish, and I believe it was written in 1905, and it's available online. So if you want to see more about that, and they have pronunciations, loads written up about how to pronounce different sounds in that book. Now, that is a very descriptive way of going about it, and everyone has it's not exactly, the slender R isn't exactly as strong in every dialect. So it depends a bit, but it's still a good description that, I think. And I would recommend that you go and listen to Changlan. Listen to the sounds in Changlan and listen carefully, maybe jack up the sound a lot on your device so you can hear it easier. The subtle differences between the dialects and between a slender, a word with a slender consonant and a broad consonant. So try and find some words, maybe using the examples we used today, such as chach. So would you have any more advice there, Emma?
Yeah, I find that especially from my own students that I've taught over the last couple of years, that people get a bit worried about it, and worried about that, especially ones like the slender R and the slender L as well. People, because it can be an unusual sound that you might not have produced before, and people worry that they're wrong if they don't do it exactly right. And even with the D, the hard D, you'll often hear, or the softer D, like jas, you do hear people with a harder D. It doesn't mean that they're wrong or they're pronouncing something incorrectly. It's something that you develop and practice over time. So as long as you're aware of it when you begin learning Irish, or if you've been learning Irish for a little while and you haven't actually thought too much about the pronunciation, you can get into it more and more. And as Siobhán says, Chonglan is brilliant. And I would suggest if anyone wants to practice it, there's if you read a kid's book, or if you find some audio that, you know, you can hear and read along with. Practice makes perfect in that sense. So just repeating what you hear over and over again, and don't get too worried about it if you don't get something the first time, or you struggle with certain pronunciations of letters. It's not the end of the world. You'll still be understood if you use, you know, a little more of a broader L than a slender L at the start. No one will misunderstand you or laugh at you or anything. It's something that comes with practice and experience in the language. But very well explained, Siobhán. I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. You're the right one for that. So gur mahagut. I've even learned that little part now on your on the definition from that book. So gohuntach, Kerkalor. On Hiet Hesht Ella, there's actually 2 questions from this viewer. So we will split them into 2 this time. How about that? So the next question comes from Matthew, and he says, is there a method for learning the verb be, i.e. to be, for the 3 major tenses at least, in any sort of rhyme, song, or anything like that? I often hear that this must be learned almost by rote or by heart in order to be able to construct sentences in Irish, and would welcome any ideas on remembering the same. So Gurmila Mahagut, Matthew, for that first question. And Siobhán, I'll pass the mic over to you. Cad happened to?
Well, I don't know of any sort of mnemonic or of any other such aid, except for one thing, and that's learning phrases or sentences containing the words, preferably in a little conversation that's easier to remember than detached phrases. So I've put a little conversation together here, and I'll read it out. So imagine the following as a conversation between 2 people, and let's call them Anya and Brian. So A will stand for Anya, B will stand for Brian. So it'll be a bit easier to follow then. So I'll just put that up on the screen. So Anya says, Tá catagam, I have a cat. So this is the present tense, by the way, the present tense of the verb be. Tá catagam, I have a cat. And will catagat, do you have a cat? So there's the question version. Brian answers, Níl catagam, the negative version. And then Anya says, Gertar go will catagat. It said that you have a cat. So to isn't used in the last one there. It's a bit more complicated, that last line, but it's a handy one to know if you can add it. But if you could only work with the first 3 lines there, Tá catagam, and will catagat, Níl catagam. If you only had those, that would be brilliant. As you can see, go will is very similar to on will. So if you only manage to handle the whole concept of go will later on, that's fine. So the main thing to learn are those 3, the first 3 there. And I'll give you an example as well in the past tense, sort of following on in the same conversation. So Brian says, Bhí madragam, I had a dog. An ro madragat, or an rev madragat. Did you have a dog? Anya replies, Ní ro madragam, or ní rev madragam. I didn't have a dog, that should read. I didn't have a dog. And Brian says, Gertar go rev madragat. It said that you had a dog. So again, that you had. That's the sense there. So those are little ones that you could, those little things. So just get the, as long as you know the different versions of the different versions of the tenses. Then you can put them in little sentences, and preferably little sentences that make sense. Maybe it's not a conversation, maybe it's more like a little poem, but because they're mostly positives and negatives and questions, it kind of works more as a conversation, I think. But I'm sure you could create something else. So what I'd recommend, and what I'll do now is, what I'll try to do anyway, is I will share. So let's see now. I will share just a tab here to show you Chonglan. And here, I hope you can all see here Chonglan, and it's showing the verb be. So we see here the past tense. So that's what we had there: vime on revme, ni revme on rome, ni rome, and so on and so forth. You can do it for different people and everything. But you can also choose the present tense, or I suppose the next one up would be the future tense. So you could create the future tense out of that little conversation I'd put together there. So you could have by madra agam, I will have a dog. On my cat agat, will you have a dog? Ní vai cat agam, I will not have a cat, and stuff like that. Whatever you want to do. So you can make them as fancy as you like, or as simple as you like. Though simpler, I think, is probably best. But you can create them out of these. So this is on chonglan.ie, and if you're really stuck for sentences, I would recommend going on to folklore.ie, and that is linked up at the top of chonglan.ie here, and they have tons of sentences, example sentences on that website. So if you just write in, let's say, buy me or beg me, whichever way you want to pronounce it, in folklore.ie, you'll more than likely come across loads of different sentences. So it's a handy thing to use, but especially these, and try and make little sentences. You could even say, buy me Jess, I will be nice, or you can make them as simple as you like. So that's what I'd recommend. So that's what I'd recommend anyway. And I'll have that little conversation there in the blog post for all to see following this live stream. Would you have any extra recommendations there, Emma?
As you were talking, and as I was reading the comments coming in also, one comment just struck me that actually it's a question, and also it reminded me of a good book. So this question just came in saying, hi, I really enjoy learning Irish from different sources. I like Buntus Kainte, but I was wondering if the Irish used would be considered a bit old-fashioned, as it is an old course. Any thoughts? So first of all, to answer the question, absolutely not old-fashioned. The Buntus Kainte books are, yes, a bit of an older course, but they're great books, and they're quite affordable as well. I think there's 3 books, and they're, I think, €10 each, or around about that, and it comes with an audio course. So why I'm drawing that into what we were just talking about is that this idea of kind of repetitive conversation, and the word tá will be there, and they'll give you 6 different example sentences with the word tá, like tá an I'm sure das, tá an Colleen gohuntach, whatever it may be. Simple sentences to help you get used to a certain verb or a certain word, whatever it may be. So if you are looking for something that's, passive learning that you can put on and listen to it, things like that might help. I've 2 of the 3 books from Buntus Kainte, and I find them very good. So to answer the question here from Alpha Element, no, they are not old-fashioned. They're definitely still in use, and you'd find a lot of people learning from Buntus Kainte still. So that was nice that we had a double question and answer there. So Gurmila Mahagud. The second part of the question from Matthew, Siobhán Bader is Feidir Latse Shinalev.
Gama Marshin. I've noticed when searching for Irish language materials and books online that there appears to be a fairly large bias towards the Ulster dialect. Several of the books I have claim to be of an Ulster persuasion. My personal preference for family reasons would be Connacht, but I run with whatever materials I acquire, as I don't want to put too fine a point on a particular dialect at this stage. However, I was wondering why this is or appears to be. Is it purely to do with demand, funding issues, or is it just my apprehension, or a bit of all these things? Go to me in a mahagi. So, what would you say to that, Emma?
Well, I was actually surprised to read that. I don't often see people saying that they're finding mostly Ulster dialect books. I don't know about you, Siobhán, but myself, I'm not familiar with too many. I know one or two. So that's interesting to hear that, definitely, because from my studies and my own research and use of books, I find that I come across either Connacht or Munster, but maybe we're all looking in different places on the internet. So I'd be interested to hear what ones you have, Matthew. But books for Connacht Irish, I was trying to think, and the only one that came to mind, again, I don't know every single book, but comments are welcome, is Colloquial Irish by Tomás O'Hede and a couple of others. But I use that and I really like it. It's quite a nice, simply done book that's easy to read and easy to use. It has examples. It's written in English, and then everything is, all your exercises are explained then, and you do them obviously as Gaeilge in Irish. But I find that it's a nice mix and it follows a nice pattern for Irish learning. So that would be one that I can recommend, and that I know is Connacht Irish. And that's probably the only one I could actually think of. Siobhán, an bhfuil ceann eile agutsa. You might have, well, you probably do have more off the top of your head.
So the thing is, that also surprised me, because I'd only recently had someone who wanted to learn Ulster Irish get in touch with me looking for Ulster resources and not knowing of any. And I've often heard even complaints or criticism, let's say, about how so many learning materials are focused on the Munster dialect, and lately it seems to have moved to the Connacht dialect, people at least commenting that, oh, everything seems to be in the Connacht dialect these days. So perhaps it's now the Ulster dialect's time to shine when it comes to a supply of learning materials. Who knows? Maybe it's because of Gaeilge, which is a fairly famous immersion course, and not just one course. They have courses in lots of different things. Basket weaving, as far as I know. I know definitely weaving, I know, and musical instruments, and they have courses and everything under the sun. So not just purely academic, let's say, Irish courses. They have courses through Irish in everything under the sun. So that could possibly be why. And I know they have a book out as well, and possibly more learning material. And so maybe that's the thing. Maybe it has become it's more common now. But when it comes to a book that focuses on the Connacht dialect, the one that came to mind for myself was Learning Irish by Micheál O'Shiel. So that's the one that came to mind for me, and that focuses on the Cuisharige dialect in particular, as far as I know.
Yeah, just as you were saying there is a lot going on both online, on television and radio, with BBC Northern Ireland, and a lot of Irish programs and radio shows and different courses online as well, coming from the Northern Irish side. So I would say that's what people are coming across as well, if they're coming across more Ulster than Connacht and Munster, because BBC Northern Ireland are doing a great job with the Irish language. So yeah, but we're happy to have them all. The more resources, the better, and the understanding of every dialect. So Gunthoch.
That's it, and there's loads of courses as well available from on Cultural in Belfast, and there's one in Derry, and there's also in Drogheda in Belfast. So there's loads of places, just loads of courses online and in person in across Ulster, and of course loads in Donegal as well. So so there's loads. So that's it. So let's get on to our next question, and our next one is from Kristen in Florida. So let's see now. No, that's not. Apologies. So let's see. So Kristen in Florida is asking about, that's it, the best way to practice. So what is the best way to practice speaking Irish every day? I live in an area that does not have a community of speakers. I practice out loud to myself and have taught my son a few phrases, so I have another person to speak with. I'm not always able to join the conversation circle on Bitesize Irish because of my work schedule. Thanks so much for your advice. Well, Cian Walla Vechagat.
That's one that I've definitely heard before, Kristen, and you're not alone in that sense. It can be difficult to find other speakers, especially, you know, if you're in a town or a city where you might not know one other person that has Irish. And of course, Bitesize is there with our weekly calls with yourself, Siobhán, and you get to practice with others. But of course, life sometimes gets in the way and you can't make it all the time. So I was thinking, what way would be the best to practice? And you said that you had taught your son some phrases so you could talk to him. Now, I don't know how old your son is, but I thought, well, why not make it something that you and your son can do together and develop his skills if he wants to, of course. But what about buying a book, a kid's book, or, you know, an intermediate, you know, teenager style book, which would still challenge you and get you speaking out loud and not having to come up with your own sentences, but rather reading aloud. Now, I know that doesn't very much develop your conversational skills, but if you got to a point where you and your son could have a little discussion after a chapter or after a page, you know, cad a chiapan tú, oh, tá sé sin gohúntoch, that's great, that's interesting, I didn't like that, I did like this. Something that, you know, you can do proactively and interactively together, because I know it can get a bit, well, it can get a bit boring if you're talking to yourself all day. And you also, you know, want to hear others speaking. So maybe this can be something that yourself and your son can work on Gaeilge together. I thought that was something that, you know, could work. Siobhán, an bhfuil mola agutsa?
Oh, but those were great. That was great advice there. Definitely reading. I find reading can help conversation, even because you're speaking, even though you're not creating the sentences and they're not often that conversational, you're still basically using the same sentence structure and the same words you would possibly use anyway. And of course it depends on the type of book you're reading, but most books, especially if it's a novel, there's a lot of descriptive speech and even dialogue in novels, for example. So I think that's a brilliant thing to do. It's a brilliant piece of advice there, Emma. And you can come across, if you find that too daunting, just getting a paper book and sitting down and reading that aloud, and you want to maybe hear the story beforehand, there's sites such as laylet.com, and there's another one as well that's very similar but doesn't come to mind.
Leonish, I think it is. It's Leonish.
That is Leonish as well. So Laylet and Leonish. So those ones, I'll link those in the blog post as well. And they would be great because you can not only see the stories for free, but you can also hear them, and so you can be sure of your pronunciations. And of course, if you're just looking for the pronunciation of one word, you can go on Changlan and it may have it there. But of course, words change according to different grammatical things like Lanish and Shevu and stuff like that, or they're in the genitive form. So you mightn't be able to find it that easily on Changlan. So that's why the MP3 recordings on those sites are wonderful. And there are other sites and other videos online as well, where you can hear stories for little children as well as ones for adults, and you can hear those and read them as well. So that's the thing. But if again, if you're reading out loud, making a few mistakes, let's say reading from a paper book, that's no harm either. You're going to learn as you go along, and that's the main thing. So that's the thing. And also, another way I would recommend for you to practice would be by going on, well, finding a Circle Cora or some sort of conversational group online, and pig.ie, that's it. Pig.ie has advertises tons of Circle Cora around the world, in Ireland and around the world. So you're pretty much bound to find something that will work for your schedule, which is a great thing, because you'd have American times and stuff like that. So it's that's a great website, and I'll have a direct link to the page where you can see all of those advertised also in the blog post. So that would also be a good way to practice, but really a mixture of both reading aloud and practicing like that would be good. So the brilliant, Anwa. Okay. An chéad ceistile mar sin. An chéad ceistile. So this one is from Sage in America, and she says, "This isn't very practical, but I'm curious on how to swear in Irish. I feel like I could use that in my day-to-day life." Smiley face. An bhfuil regra at the Roshin.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't swear very much in Irish. I don't swear very much in general. But if I do, I'm keen. I'm more so one to make it sound Irish, make an English curse word sound Irish. But I thought that myself, that I don't know many, and I actually purchased a book online. It was quite cheap. I think it might have only been €5 or €6, and it's called Colourful Irish Phrases by Micheál O'Cneil. Now I have it actually here. It looks like this. I like it. Now, it goes from everything from swear words, insults, personality traits, comparisons. So it's not just all swear words and curses in the book. Now, some of them are a bit more archaic than others, and all of them definitely wouldn't be used. But it's something that I got for a bit of fun. And if you pick 3 out of every chapter, you'll have a full vocabulary or a very colourful mouth as Gaeilge for cursing. But myself, I don't know any, other than, oh, I hear now, oh God, things like that. Siobhán, an bhfuil agutsa?
It's more so like you're saying, I'm not one to curse myself either, and it's more words maybe of dismay or shock, that sort of thing. I wouldn't call it cursing myself, but some might categorize it as such. But those things like as you said, oh God or oh gosh, or whatever version you might use in English, there are many in Irish as well, such as asoch, and that could be like, oh, you'd say that more than exasperation, I suppose. Asoch, like and a whiten, like if you saw something that was surprising, or it could be something that's just driving you up the wall. So there's lots of those phrases. I'd use a good lot of those, but those are just two that came to mind there. So asoch is kind of like for God's sake, and a whiten is like saying, oh virgin. So that's quite different from what you'd say in English, very different. But to my knowledge, these things aren't classed as bad words in Irish. Not the same as in English, where you sometimes have people saying, don't say, oh my God, or so it's a bit of a different approach. Even a whigen sounds so strange to say, oh virgin in English. It's weird. So it's a difference in culture as well. And saying these they're more, I would say, much more acceptable in Irish. And there's loads of phrases in Irish that would sound very strange in English. And stuff like this. There's one, it was in Fihiblinig Fós, 20 years of growing. What is it? Manamon Jowl, or I might have misphrased it a bit there, but it's like my soul from the devil. So it's a bit like, goodness gracious, or something like that. It's again sort of one of those phrases that you use in dismay or something like that. So there are tons of those. Now, for any Bitesize members here, we have two lessons on this topic. We have a topic called, let's see what it's called now, cursing, shock, dismay, angry retorts. And there's also the other lesson called cursing, curses and name calling. And if you go to either of those, especially the latter, you'll see they're very colourful ones compared to English. They're much more descriptive and a bit more poetic, you could say. So that's the idea with those, and I'll have those linked in the blog post. There you go.
There's one from the book that I remember now, actually. It's to tell someone, to F off, if you want to say it that way. And it's Te agus fadil, which means go and whistle. And I like that one because, it's more vulgar in English, but it's nicer as Gaeilge, in my opinion. But that doesn't go to say that there's not curses. We're just not ones to curse very much ourselves. But if you do want to actually there's always curse words evolving as well. New words are coming into English to curse, and things are, and swear words and things like that. You will hear a lot of them in music as Gaeilge now. There is a group called Kneecap, which they have a very colourful mouth as Gaeilge in both vocabulary wise with curse words and that. So if you're very interested in getting what's happening, at the moment, rather than something from a leabhar, you can have a look on YouTube for Kneecap. So very simply, the English word kneecap. They're a duo from the north of Ireland. So yeah, that might interest some of you also.
Mar sin an chéad chéistelle ó Linda, West Washington State. Goramagad Linda as the chéist. And thank you for your question. Remembering which is which and correct pronunciations of cahar, cahar, and cahir. So that's Linda's question there. How to remember which is which, and I will bring up those there. There we go. So they're there, cahar, cahar, and cahir. So would you have any tips there, Emma, on how to remember these?
Surprisingly, I have gotten, surprisingly to me perhaps, I've gotten this question before. I got it last year with my own students in my class, and for me, I'd never put those three words together. I'd never think, oh God, this is tricky, because I learned them from such a young age, they're used in such different contexts. And of course, you could just say, well, they are what they are, and you have to learn them. But that's not a very practical solution to the problem to people, who are learning three very commonly used words that almost look quite the same. So my advice then and my advice now is the same, and that would be two things. Number one is to put them into sentences, put them into relevant sentences. Yeah, so cahar, four, that's the word for four, cahar, the first one there. So, make something, I have 4 dogs, yeah, or, Kara, but four days, or cahar, counting things is hard, isn't it? Because it changes. But
you have to kind of say like busa cahar, chacha cahar.
Yeah, chacha cahar, number 4, yeah. Think of the house, your neighbor's house, it's number 4, yeah. Then the second one, Cahir, something to do with going to the Cahir, which is a city, as Gaeilge. And then the last one is a Cahir, which is a chair. They're three very different words. So if you make three simple phrases to go with those, so see an Cahir, or, you know, dul gudi an Cahir, something like that, something very basic that you can differentiate that way. But that might be easier said than done. But if you look at the words themselves, if you want to look at a different way and not put them into sentences, the vowels will help you out. So if you're looking, we see the same C and TH, C and TH, C and TH in all three of them. But the first one there is Cahir, Cahir. Now we had that earlier on with the pronunciation of broad and slenders, you know, Cahir. And the second one is Cahir, Cahir, and Cahir. So the second and the third word there, Cahir and Cahir, are pronounced the same at the start because that's a C-A-T-H. There's actually a word in Irish that's just C-A-T-H, and it's Ca, means battle. So if you think of it that way, that Ca, but then you're going with a slender E in Cahir, Cahir. So it'll change the way that it's said. Cahir then is Cahir, okay, so we'll take that one maybe as the base one. And then the final one, you see a little difference in the ending. So in Cahir and Cahir, they both end in A-I-R. But in Cahir, it's an A-O-I-R. So the start of the second and the third one are the same, but this ending of the first and the second one are the same. So there's kind of an odd one out if you group them both together. I know that might sound a bit complicated, but if you really look at it and think of it, you have Cahir and Cahir, and then you have Cahir, Cahir. So you're putting more of an emphasis there on Cahir at the end. That's just, you know, that's not a fact that I read in a book. This is something that I had to kind of come up with for my students to help them. So both looking at the way that they're spelled and taking note of those slender vowels, so the E and the I, make that difference in Cahir and Cahir, and use maybe Cahir as your base one, your one that, you know, you follow suit, and then you make the different differences between both of the other two. Both that and putting them into sentences that will give you the context for the words, and just repetition. Practice makes perfect, yeah. So repeat it, and write it out and things like that, and it'll become like second nature eventually. I promise. If you use them enough, you'll get used to them, and they won't be as, you know, you won't even think of them in the same context anymore. Siobhán,
that's great advice there. Definitely using them and reading them and taking note of the differences in each word. That's right. It's kind of like Cahir, if you know the Cahir is city, and Cahir with an E is Cahir for, and ear, the Cahir. You could think sit here and the Cahir. I think I've heard someone else use that before to teach the differences between those, or at least between Cahir and Cahir. So maybe sit here and the Cahir and the chair. Maybe that could help you. But definitely noticing them, and I'd say, as you were saying there, they're not ones that would mix that I would mix up either. I suppose it's a bit like in English for an English learner. You might an English learner might find the words here and here very similar and confuse the two, whereas anyone who's a native English speaker for certain wouldn't connect the two words at all. So it's a similar thing. So just to, that's it, be observant maybe, and note things and write sentences, and just using the language will help you, definitely. And but that was great advice there, Emma. And well,
Gurmila. Okay, so an chéad ceist eile is from Darren in Savannah in the USA. And the question is, in regards to the word that, how do you know when to use a shin, she shin, or just shin? Same for the word this, which is a sho, she sho, or sho. It's all a bit confusing. Thanks. So, Siobhán, cad a cheapan tú? Are you able to explain the difference between all 3 of those, or all 6 of those even?
So the good news is what applies for seo is the same for sin. So in any of these sentences that I'll give you, you can replace seo with sin. And it'll just mean that rather than this then, and vice versa. So that's the good thing. So I'll give you examples here. So you use she in a sentence when the pronoun is the subject. That is, the pronoun is who or what performs the action. Now, that's easier to understand when you have an example, such as rinne sé seo dochar. This did harm. This here, sé seo, did the action. That's sé seo is what did the action. Rinne sé seo dochar. This did harm. You use then when the pronoun is the object. Now, what that means is the pronoun is affected by the action. So it's not the one or the thing or whoever doing the action. It's being affected by the action. So an example of that would be rinne Sean é seo. Sean did this. This had the action done to it, or é seo had the action done to it. So sé seo is when it does the action, such as rinne sé seo dochar. This did harm. But rinne Sean é seo. Sean did this. Sean did something to this. So he did it. So it's a different thing. You could think of it as in the first one, sé seo is in power, you could say. It's in power, it's superior, let's say. Whereas with é seo, this one is perhaps oppressed in a sense. It is having things done to it. So it's inferior, let's say, because it's not in control. You could think of it like that. So maybe that's a way of wrapping your mind around that whole concept. And then when it's just seo, that's an easier one, I think. When it's just seo, that's when seo is used following a noun. So an cóta seo, this coat. So when you want to say this house or this woman or an teach seo, an bhean seo, the only thing is you don't say cóta seo, you say an cóta seo. So it's literally the coat, the coat, this. So that's literally what you're saying. But that's the only difference there. So an cóta seo. So an cóta, the coat. This coat, an cóta seo. So because it's a specific coat, it makes sense that you're still using an, even though you're using seo. And as I said, the same applies for sin. So you could say, instead of saying an cóta seo, you could say an cóta sin. Instead of saying rinne sé seo dochar, this did harm, you can say rinne sé sin dochar, that did harm. Rinne Sean é sin. Sean did that. Instead of saying rinne Sean é seo, Sean did this. So it's as easy as that. But again, I could definitely understand how it's difficult to wrap your head around the difference between sé seo and é seo. So just have a good think about that, I think. Those two were definitely a bit finicky to get your mind around. But maybe it should help you looking at subject and object. If Googling that and looking at that in English sentences may help you understand how that what that means in Irish. So just the subject and the object of a sentence. What does that mean? And if you know another language, compare it to how it works in another language as well. So that's what I'd recommend for that.
So Gahuntoch. Okay, so we are almost to the end of our list of questions that were sent in, but I think we can maybe skim quickly through 1 or 2 questions that are coming in live in the chat, Siobhán. Cad a cheapan tú?
On what?
We see that there's many coming in, and we probably won't get to all of them, but let me have a look. What about this one? This one's a common one, but I think people are still asking it, so there's still people that don't know the answer. So can you recommend some sources to help me learn the language? As in a beginner, it would help. Now, well, Elle, if that's your name, you're looking at us. So Bitesize Irish, we have Coursey available. We've memberships. We have a free taster course that will be linked at the end of this on the blog post that you can try out the starting points of Gaeilge with us. And then we have an Explore membership, which as a beginner would suit you. So if you'd like to give our taster membership a go, make sure you can click our link at the end of this live stream in the description or in the blog post that will be on our blog. We also have many things on our website, bitesize.irish, that are free for you to use as a beginner, with, you know, some videos from Siobhán about pronunciation, counting, introducing yourself, so on and so forth, and on our YouTube channel in general. So if anyone is interested in making those first steps, we're here to help you. This is why we're here, to help you out with that. And I suppose we'll take one other question in from the chat. What about this one? This one's an interesting one. On digging to Gaeilge na Halaban, Ke ko Cosúil is atá an dá hanga I the Huram. So do you understand Scottish Gaelic? How similar are those two languages in your opinion? So for me personally, I can understand a bit of it. I actually have a colleague here. I work in Germany here, and I have a colleague who is a PhD student in Gaeilge na Halaban, and I listened to a video of hers speaking, and I could understand maybe about 60% of it. Some words are much different, but others are quite similar. So it's quite interesting to see. Siobhán, an diggin tusa in Gaeilge na Halaban.
Cuidse. So I have a similar experience as well with Gaeilge na Halaban, and I tried a while back there. I tried the Duolingo Gaelic course, and that was very interesting, where the words weren't the exact same as Irish. They were synonyms often, or close synonyms. Maybe they wouldn't mean the exact same thing in Irish, but they'd be related, so it would make sense. Maybe they'd confuse one at first, but they'd make sense. And there are a few words that sound different, but or that are completely different even, but you'd easily get used to them, especially because they're so Gaelic sounding. So they sound like Irish words, just they're not Irish words exactly, so they're just different words. So, but they're easier to remember than, let's say, a very exotic language. So that's what I found. But there are lots of the sentence structure be very similar, and even if it's not the exact same as Irish, you could easily get the hang of it, because it's just like a very strong dialect. That's what I think. And I've heard it said by a man who is fluent in Irish and in Scots Gaelic, as far as I know. He said anyway that he did a week-long, I think it was crash course sort of thing or something like that, or he said that one could anyway. Not sure if he did it himself, but he said that if someone was fluent in Irish, they could easily pick up a decent proficiency in Irish, in Gaelic, I should say, in Scots Gaelic, in like a week, if they did some sort of crash course. And I'd say so. If I sat down and did the whole Duolingo course as much as I could, in as little time as possible, I'm sure I would, by the time after a week or two, I'm sure I'd have a very good grasp of it. But even now, as it is, if I see something written in Gaeilge na Halaban, I can understand the majority of it. It's the pronunciations I'd find harder. That's definitely more difficult when people are speaking. But when it comes to the written word, it's definitely easier. Definitely.
Well, Siobhán, we won't hold you to it yet, but maybe this time next year we might have this in Gaeilge na Halaban if we both do the Duolingo course diligently enough. Okay, so we're almost out of time, but I think we've time for one more question. Well, there's two parts to the question, but we'll see if we can get at least one of them. So this question is from one of our Grow members, Daniel in Sasna, and Daniel poses always some good questions to us that make us, think a little bit, especially on vocabulary and differences and things like that. So Daniel asks, in English, the same word mean, i.e. mean, is used to ask, what do you mean? And what does this word or sentence mean? I might well be wrong, but I think that French and German both use different words for mean in each of these two kinds of sentences. Now, I'm not going to try the French one. Siobhán is the Latin in a second. But in German, you'd say, was meinen Sie versus was bedeuten dieses Wort oder dieser Satz? Siobhán, I will Frankie.
I'll try, but it's going to be brutal. Que voulez-vous dire? Que signifie ce mot ou cette phrase? So, apologies for the terrible pronunciation.
Brilliant. So Daniel asks then, is Irish more like English, where you can use mean in both of the sentences, or is it like French and German in this regard? That is to say, does Irish use the same verb in both of them? Gurb míle maith go bhfeasacht gach for cower ober gohuntach le Bitesize. So, Siobhán, cad a cheapan tú? Good question.
Anchicht ar fad, anchicht. That's a brilliant question there, Daniel, and one I don't think I'd really considered it before, but now that you've asked, I would definitely say that Irish is more akin to French and German. As to ask what a word means, one would ask Cadachelian and Foculshaw. And you would never use that sort of sentence to ask, what do you mean? Never. You would instead use Cadatá geisteagat or Céirdatá geisteagat, which translates more literally to what do you have in question. So that's the thing there. So it's they're quite different, as you can see, quite different. And there would be other ways, wouldn't there, Emma, to ask what does a word mean in Irish?
Yeah, there'd be, well, you'd still use keel or you'd use the word brie as well. That's what would come to mind. You'd say cadachelian or cadisbrile, or cadiskiele. No, keel, yeah. Cadisbrie, so what is the meaning? Brie or keel is a meaning. So cadiskiele an Foculshaw. So what is the meaning of this word, if you want to put it literally, or what is the meaning with this word? But what is the meaning of this word versus what does this word mean? But you still see that verb, well, you either see keel or in the second form then brie, cadisbrile. But when you're asking someone then, what do you mean? You'd say cadatá geisteagat. So what help me out, Siobhán. What is it that you have in question? What is in question? What is it that you have in question?
Something like that. Yeah, that's what you'd say, literally. So very, very different altogether. So apparently it is similar to other European languages. And you often see that with Irish, that you can often draw similarities between Irish and other major European languages when you can't draw any comparisons between Irish and English in certain regards, obviously, such as in this case. So sometimes things are very similar, but we say things the exact same way in Irish as you do in English, and of course sometimes English is the same as most other European languages, but sometimes English is the odd one out. So it's so that's the thing. So yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Agus cuide dós dócha. So now the other question that Daniel sent in was, Irish and English often differ in terms of which prepositions are used in which phrases. For example, I think that one listens with rather than to the radio in Irish. What would be the correct preposition to use in the Irish for such phrases as, it's too hot for me today, and this food is too spicy for us. Gur míle maithagí as gach uair cabhair agus gach uair obair go hiintach le Bitesize. Gur míle maithagad Daniel. So, mar sin, céan raig ra bheith agad go sin?
Well, when I was thinking about it and I was looking at what you were thinking, Siobhán, because myself and Siobhán share some ideas before we go live, I would have automatically thought the preposition do, so dumb. So in the example sentences, one was, it is too hot for me today. So I would have said, tá sé róthe dom iniu or niuv. So it's too hot for me, dom. Now this is too as well, but again, if you're learning Irish and you're trying to learn the prepositions, don't even try and liken them to their English meaning, because they won't make sense really. So they're their own entity. But tá sé róthe dom iniuv, or tá an bia seo ró spiasfroch doing. So again, this is the conjugated preposition of do. Yeah, dom, dit, do, de, so on and so forth. But Siobhán, you would say that there's another preposition that can be used.
Yes, it's not as common as do, and that is ig, which can mean at or have, as we had earlier when we were talking about tag caf tagum, I have a cat. So that's the same preposition there, ig. So you can say instead tá sé róthe hagam inniu, or tá an bia seo ró spiasfroch agin, instead of dum or doon. So it's just another way, and I came across that now. Definitely do, the preposition do is more common, and it also happens to be closer to, I suppose, the English version as well. At least it's easier to compare the two, whereas egg is very different. It, in a sense, this more means at or having. So I suppose it's a bit different, but you can use that as well. But do would be more common. But just in case you were already familiar with using egg in this context, or you ever come across it, this is an example. These are examples of that. So they're interchangeable, but as I said, do would be more common.
Good question, Daniel. Garmil Mahagat. Daniel is one of our Grow members and is very diligent working. And I like Daniel's questions because he makes me he rattles my brain with some of them, because I know I can get an answer for all of them. So Garmil Mahagat. Okay, so we are almost out of time. We'll do one more question from the live chat. I want to say Garmina Mahagut to everyone. So Garmina Mahagut for tuning in, or if you're watching later. But I found this question interesting because I suppose I've experience in it. And so Far Gaeilge asks, what do people do if they study a language like Gaeilge in university? Like, do they become fluent in the language, or do they just learn grammar? Well, Far Gaeilge, let me tell you, don't just do grammar. Grammar is one part, it's a very important part, but I studied Gaeilge in UCC in Cork. I did my bachelor in it, and I actually now teach in a university in Germany, and we do grammar, very important part, but you will learn a lot about the culture and the history of the Irish language. Of course, your cora, so your pronunciation, or your conversation, pronunciation. The further you go into studying, you'll do literature, poetry, history. There's a lot more to Irish than grammar, and I know a lot of the questions that come in from Bitesize members is grammar, and grammar is a very important part of the language, but there's many other aspects to Gaeilge. So don't get put off. Anyone that's thinking about learning Irish, don't get put off by us talking about grammar for some of this live stream. There's plenty more to be learned and to be studied in university. Siobhán, an bhléonrad le rágat faoi sin.
Sinead, that's it exactly. It's much more than just grammar, and there's lots of elements, and even in I know in the Leaving Cert years ago they used to do It was very similar to today's university courses to a certain extent, and as in they did the history of Irish, which they don't do anymore in schools, but that was done. And so, as you're saying there, literature and the history, I suppose, a little more similar in a sense, maybe if for people who've done the leaving cert, maybe in it to a certain extent, I suppose it's more similar to the to maybe the English version, as in like you're studying literature, whereas you do in Irish as well, but it's often more, you do it for the leaving as well. You do study literature, but it's, I suppose, maybe not the same way as you would for English. But that's it. You do study many different aspects of Irish, not just grammar. And I suppose when it comes to people reaching fluency, that would definitely depend on the person. And I know some people manage to get a degree in Irish and their Irish isn't up to scratch. Maybe they got just a middling, but it was about scraped test, maybe. I'm not too sure. So there's some people have a degree and it's very different from another person's degree. So it just necessarily doesn't mean that someone, if you want to become fluent, doesn't mean, I'll just go to a university course and do the bare minimum and I'll be fluent. Of course, there's and there's also, as you're saying there, people go to do immersion courses and everything, and of course it depends on the individual student, and that's the same for every single faculty and everything in a university. It all depends as well, and of course I'm sure it depends on the university as well, but it's definitely the student and how dedicated they are. But that's the thing, there's a lot involved.
Yeah, well, I don't think if your entire university course was just on Irish grammar, I think I would have dropped out in my first year. I think my brain would have exploded. So luckily, you have a choice and you've elective modules that you can do. And if you're interested in Gaeilge, or if you're interested in place names, there's universities more often than not offer a range of different well, depending on where you are, of course, depending on the university, but they offer a range of different things that will suit the student. If you've no interest in literature, you don't have to do it. You have some modules that you might have to touch on it, but it all depends. So no, not just grammar, plenty more. There's plenty more to the story of Irish other than, learning your irregular verbs. So don't let that get you down if you are in your studies of Gaeilge. All righty. Well, we've gone over our 1 hour mark, but we had some very, very interesting questions this month. I want to say gur míle maith agaibh for everybody, to everybody who sent in a question. If we didn't get to your question, that's all right. We'll come back to them next month in our next month's Q&A. I want to say gur maith agutsa Siobhán for spending the last hour with me.
Oh, it was very fun. Ans priúil.
Gohuntach. And you are all welcome to, debate and chat in the comments below this video as well. You can all help each other as well in answering unanswered questions by us and have a little discussion. It's always nice to see you all commenting below. So, gur míle maith agaibh, ben me de kind. We'll speak to you all next month, or to any of our members, we'll see you on Pobble, or we'll see you in our weekly calls, whatever it may be. Gur míle maith agaibh agus slán go fóill.
Slán go fóill.